Welcome everyone, welcome to the Bonded Warehouse. For those of you that haven't been before, a little bit of history about this building. So it goes back to Victorian years. It used to be a storage for cigarettes and alcohol. Famous Manx song, of course, so have a look around, you never know what you might find. So yeah, welcome to Bonded Warehouse for this event, harnessing the power of GenAI. So I'm Simon Shaw, I'm the Regional Director for Codurance here in Manchester, and also our office in Leeds. Just want to do a little bit of scene setting, not for too long, a bit of housekeeping, and I'll hand over to our brilliant panel. Just really, I guess, a couple of words on why we're holding this event now. Look, AI, you don't need me to say this, but a lot of publicity, getting a lot of attention, a lot of hype as well. Possibly some of that is justified, and we'll maybe get into that this evening. Also, quite a lot of negativity, and there's some almost dystopian stuff in the press and social media and the mainstream press. Maybe some of that is justified as well. Let's see if we can get into that as well. But ultimately, we've got this panel together today and invited you because we want to have I suppose, a pretty measured, balanced, and well-informed conversation. And it is a conversation, so the panel will be having a fireside chat, but there's going to be plenty of time for Q&A at the end. I just wanted to share this quote, so if you want to just have a little browse of that, I'll read it out in case it's not too legible at the back. So it says, what we want is a machine that can learn from experience, and the possibility of letting the machine alter its own instructions provides the mechanisms for this. So a little test now. Anybody hazard a guess as to where that's from? Who said that? Alan Turing, yeah. So I thought that was perfect, one of Manchester's greatest visionaries, of course, one of our greatest sons. So I guess that for me really resonated because there's a lot of discussion, of course, about what's come next through AI, but perhaps another thing we might touch on this evening is maybe this is not necessarily revolutionary, but an evolution. And certainly, that could have been written in a blog post, I think, from yesterday. A little bit on housekeeping then. So we're going to kick off the discussion soon. So we'll run till 7:30. We will have time for Q&A, so we'll aim to finish this panel discussion by somewhere between 7 and 15. There's a lot of food left outside, there's a lot of drinks, so it doesn't have to finish at 7:30. So for those of you who can stay, please do. You can hang around. We'd really like that. Some networking at the end. We are filming the event, and we are going to publish the recording of this on social media, just so that you're aware. I'm sure there isn't going to be a fire alarm, but if there is, it's just back out where. So everybody that came in the main entrance there is just back out towards the Crystal Maze. But we've quite a few people from Codurance, so we'll guide you out. If anybody reads the toilet, it's just to the right. So leave this room here, go to the right, some kitchens, and you'll find the toilets. I'll just leave this up for a minute. So if you want to submit questions during the event, you download the QR code. I'll keep an eye on Slido. You can then vote for the questions that you like, and I'll keep an eye on those. And the most popular ones we'll run through those at the end. So I'll just leave that up for another 30 seconds. I can go back to that if I need to. Here we go. So as I said, I work for an organisation called Codurance. I just wanted to spend a minute or two on who we are and what we do. So we're a global software consultancy. We're now based in 8 office locations. So we've just opened an office in Sao Paulo. As I said, I work in Manchester and Leeds, so I've not been to any of those more glamorous locations yet. It's our 10th anniversary this year, so happy birthday to us. We've got just over 200 employees that work for us. We're called craftspeople, that's what we call ourselves. I'll explain why in a minute. And pretty much everyone that works for Codurance is a permanent member of staff, and that's something that's really important to us. So just a little bit on software craftsmanship, because it's not necessarily a term that everybody understood or has heard about. So for us, and it very much underpins how we work and what we do, software craftsmanship is about building well-crafted software. It's about building quality products. So for us, that means software that's well designed, that's clearly been well tested, it's performance, and it's reliable, it's scalable, and it's, I guess to use a bit of an agile phrase, it's responsive to change. So that's something we really pride ourselves on, this ethos of software craftsmanship. So that's pretty much it from me. Welcome again. Thanks for coming, everyone. It's really good to see a strong turnout. I'm going to hand over to Matt now. We'll do some introductions for the panel, and then we'll start the conversation.
Brilliant, Matt. Thanks, Simon. Great to be here as well. So I think before we sort of start and get into it, we'll do some quick introductions. So hello, I'm Matt. I'm one of our principal software class people with Codurance. So I work quite a lot with CTOs, heads of engineering, architects, those types of roles. And more, I'm talking to them about AI, Gen AI. How can we help them leverage Gen AI in their business to be more effective? So that's myself. Alongside me, I've got a really good panel here tonight of great speakers. Guys, before we start, do some quick intros.
Yep, sure. Hi guys, this is Dinesh. I'm a senior solutions architect from Amazon Web Services. I've been with them for almost 3 years, 7 months now, and I take care of Scottish central government customers, which is primarily Registers of Scotland, Social Security Scotland, Agriculture and Rural Economy. So those are the primary customers I look after. Otherwise, I specialize in machine learning as well, which means I get a chance to work with our customers across globe on AI/ML use cases. And topics such as Gen AI is something I discuss with our customers day in, day out to understand their use cases and help. And I live in Edinburgh with my family. That's me.
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name's Jo Liston. I don't know if my Manc twang's coming through, but I'm Manchester sort of born and bred. I was lucky enough to go to university in this great city, and I got my very first job in technology working for Fujitsu, who used to be known as ICL back in sort of like 1996, where I did my sandwich placement year, almost like before the kind of internet even happened. So it's just been a phenomenal amount of change. I spent about 25 years working in the supply side of things, working for Fujitsu, working for a company called Atos IT Services, who you might be familiar with through the Olympic Games, where they were the prime sponsor. Spent 17 years there, and then I went off to Microsoft, spent a couple of years in Microsoft, again on the client side of things, working with enterprise customers. Worked for Sopra Steria. I don't know if there's anybody from Sopra in the room. There was a few potentially on the guest list. And I moved into the Salesforce ecosystem sort of a few years ago. But I'm now at a company called Saint-Gobain. You may not have heard of Saint-Gobain, but they're a 350-year-old business. They're listed on the French Stock Exchange. Just posted our half-year results, turning over 25 billion euros. But they're all about sort of light and sustainable construction and trying to make the world a better home. And probably the glass in this building and the plasterboard in your walls potentially have come from a Saint-Gobain business. But I'm really enjoying working inside a sort of, I guess, for a chief digital information officer in the role of director of product ownership and growth. And ultimately that means my team are out talking to business stakeholders about pain, problems, things that we can solve. And certainly Gen AI we see as being an absolute part of our capability and tool set to start to drive and solve some business problems.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Adia. I'm a senior software engineer for Jaguar Land Rover. I work with backend systems, developing RESTful APIs, and I work with providing feature updates remotely over the cars. I have previous experience as a team lead and a software engineer for an e-commerce company. And again, I was very happy to be able to academically study at the University of Manchester Computer Science. It's really nice being here and meeting you all. Thank you.
Great stuff. Okay, so I think let's start off with definitions. I think we've all heard the term Gen AI, but do we really understand what it means? Do we all have the same understanding of even what Gen AI is? Also, what is it not as well? So panel, what do we think? What is Gen AI and maybe what is it not as well?
Yeah, maybe I can start with. So that's a question that we try to answer our customers. So we have always heard about AI, but what is Gen AI? The Gen AI is capability wherein the system is able to create new content that did not exist before. So you might have come across so many of the photographs or stories in LinkedIn or wherever the social media that was not existing, but the system has created it for you. So it is learning to create new content on its own. It could be an image, or it could be a paragraph on its own, or a summary, or anything of that sort, or a translation. So ability to create new content that did not exist, that's the power of Gen AI. And I think, you might have heard about ChatGPT, Llama, all of those big models that are out there have this capability to create these new content. But then we will dive into why, what, how later on, but we will stop there. Maybe you will have other dimensions of GenAI too.
Yeah, I can add. So to me and my understanding, for me, generative AI is a form of AI that's providing, as Dinesh mentioned, new content, and that's using some machine learning models. There's different processes in which generative AI can be computed, but the more important thing is the amount of forms it can take in terms of results. It can be text, it can be videos, it can be images, and all that kind of variety is allowing multiple industries to benefit from it. So you can have content creation, like creating stories. You can have articles, you can have benefits in marketing. You can have videos for marketing. So the possibilities are exceptional with this tool. What generative AI isn't, it's basically any kind of artificial intelligence that isn't generating new content, such as supervised or unsupervised learning or natural language processing. Things can be included in different algorithms, but there's a difference between them. I would say it's a tool that's allowing you to do your job better if you know how to use it. And I would say it's a reasonable concern about how it works and what output it provides, especially because of deep fakes. For example, do we actually trust this has been real provided, or is it some kind of AI that's been generating it? So I would mention that as one of the concerns. And I would also mention the training data that can be biased and a bit difficult to imagine, but I'm sure we can go more in depth towards these topics going on.
Yeah. I think the simplest analogy I heard recently is more like, what can I do with electricity? You can do so much. So GenAI is like that. It all boils down to what use case you put it to use, rather than asking what can I do with it.
So I think probably let's sort of use that as a segue then to talk about use cases. So I think recently I remember sort of reading a blog post, I think from the CTO of HubSpot, and he was talking about a new tool that they've been building that is kind of effectively sort of gluing ChatGPT and HubSpot together to automate some workflows around HubSpot. So rather than you going onto the HubSpot UI and clicking buttons and searching and querying, you can ask it through kind of a natural language textual interface.
Yeah.
So I guess that's kind of just one possible use case. But I guess panel, what do we think about sort of other use cases that might exist around Gen AI?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, I think the opportunities around sales and marketing in particular, I think are quite profound in terms of, where you can start to do things faster, taking away that whole staring into a blank sheet of paper and to say, where can I start, and actually allowing that generative AI. And I think in terms of exposing it to insight, personal data to help you be really tailored and be customized, I think, in terms of how you kind of communicate. So I think the ability, certainly in sales and marketing, to do more campaigns and be more effective about the way that you run those campaigns. And I think in terms of things that are happening now, I think if you've been following the news about Octopus, who are, one of the recommended energy providers, although the market's kind of collapsed really. Where's competition gone in that market for us? But they've run generative AI alongside their contact center people, and now generative AI is doing most of that contact. So if you liaise with Octopus and say, hey, don't increase my direct debit, I know I'm going to be good for winter, or that kind of interaction, most of that is now 80 to 90% of the correspondence between that brand and you is through a generative AI, but it feels like you're actually liaising with a human. But upskill, it creates opportunity for that human to be able to do more meaningful work. And this feels very reminiscent about the stories that my mum used to tell me about when the word processor got invented. When a lot of the women were doing the typing roles and say, don't worry, women have just entered the workplace and now they're going to be out of the workplace. They're not. It's going to create opportunity to upskill. So actually, I think if it's applied really effectively in the businesses, solving business problems and business pain, where you can actually help create more meaningful work for people and allow the generative AI to do more of that kind of repetitive and quicker work, so you can be really effective.
Yeah. And other spaces that I see is also in new product developments or new experiences that customers are trying to give their customers. And of course, the productivity is another stream. It need not be the productivity of just the the business process workers. It could also be the productivity of developers. I know today's our focus was more around software engineering. So I'm sure you would have heard of generative AI tools that are generating code for you. So you just give the intent that I want to write a script that does this, and then it creates a chunk of code in your favorite language, either it be Java or Python or whatever it is. So I think they get to spend more time on the thing that differentiates you from the competitors, rather than the monotonous chunk of code they would have otherwise sat and did a research on some web or wrote it themselves. But either way, it's going to shrink that time and allow them to focus on value creation rather than spending that usual time. So productivity is another big stream where we see customers are leveraging it.
I guess on that sort of theme of software engineering as well. So there's been quite a lot of talk and worry, I guess, around GenAI and perhaps kind of replacing software engineering entirely or replacing software developers. Do we think that's going to happen, or do we think actually, more to your point, Dinesh, it's going to make us more productive as software engineers and software developers?
I think Adia has got a better answer, so I'll ask her this.
Okay, I can elaborate on that, of course. So I would say the way it is at the moment, it's an assistant. I would say it can help in many levels of your software development. It can help you, first of all, write code, obviously. You can write code snippets, you can write whole functions or bigger complex bits of code as well, wider logics. But you can also have it for debugging, which is kind of making it more efficient. You get to find the errors more in time. You have a better rollback, you have a faster recovery time. It's helping you with testing as well. And I would say here, let alone the fact that it can actually write your tests, it can also identify use cases that the human might not have recognized. So again, that's a good help. Why I would say it's not necessarily doing the work by itself, it's because it's not sensing the wider business needs. It's not sensing, for example, more complex requirements that might change, or, for example, the communication that you might need to have with stakeholders, user changes, the user experience. So it still needs somebody that can assist that process. I can speak for the vehicle domain that I work on. It can help in manufacturing, it can help in design, it can help in testing. At the moment, Jaguar is using artificial intelligence and machine learning for autonomous vehicle systems, for example, the self-driving cars. And we are actually considering generative AI going forward. But there are concerns around, say, for example, the legal and the ethical reasons. Whether we have data, where is it coming from? The code that we ask for, where is it coming from? How do we contribute to the training data of a generative model? These are the concerns that we have. But going past, if there's a suitable generative AI for us, it can help, for example, optimizing the design of some products that we have in manufacturing for the vehicles. Or it can help you create data for our own training models. For example, machine learning models that can create synthetic data for, as I said, the self-driving cars. So the possibilities are there, but at the moment I feel like the human interaction that's required to do our job is still necessary.
No, I think there's no way we are going to take the human element out of it. I think going forward in future, we will see two teams, one that leverages GenAI, one that doesn't. And I think there is a competitive edge that you're giving to your the developers, if you're letting them to actually use the generative AI tools wherever possible. So I can quote a couple of use cases we had talked about previously, Matt. One is I've come across this tool. I don't remember the name of it. I've come across this tool which can actually scan your infrastructure as code and find the potential vulnerabilities that you are open to, and can actually even do recommendations as to how could you potentially fix them. Now that's a good place to start with for anyone worried about security. And another use case that I've seen our customers are already solving is some of the legacy softwares many of our customers are stuck with. They can now actually rewrite them in a language of their choice. Let the generative AI do that bit, that heavy lifting bit, and probably they will still spend some more time tweaking it, but not that kind of time they would have spent earlier if they want to do a digital transformation for a legacy architecture. So, the software engineering is going to be there, but it's going to be even more specialized and value creating proposition than doing the heavy lifting they've always been doing.
Do we think then perhaps that would lead to different roles coming or new or sort of roles emerging that we don't have today around Gen AI and AI tools?
Yes.
Yeah, it's got totally. I mean, the jobs that are going to get created, we're going to can only just like hazard a guess what they're going to be. And you can go back 20 years when people started to have like head of customer experience and customer experience manager, and you're thinking, what's that all about? And then now we've got tens of thousands of people with those job titles in the UK, hundreds of thousands globally. There's going to be a whole array of new job descriptions. And I think to the sort of business leaders in the room, just I guess to remind you that no one's got 10 years of Gen A experience here. We're almost at very similar starting points. So harbour yourselves, harbour your team talent, but also think about the young people, and I guess almost like a plea on behalf of Andy Burnham and his initiative to try and make Greater Manchester an awesome place to work and make us the absolute sort of digital capital of the world. And just remember to just place bets where you can on young people with their appetite to learn and their drive to almost help supercharge you. But untold possibilities, and I think Gen AI is almost like it's going to be another industry step up and change for the tech business, in the same way that the internet was in the late 90s and the way cloud was post-COVID. And I think for a lot of businesses who are sort of scratching their heads going, how on earth do I harness this? Think of all those businesses who were super duper nervous before cloud about what data do I put in the cloud, and then when COVID struck, oh my God, were you glad you put your data up in the cloud to really enable your business? So I think just encourage you to say, what content have you got that's out there already? It's already on the internet, or it's on the back of your product. It's in emails that go out to your customers, suppliers, etc. So almost like, don't be nervous about that. You might have IP, you might have code that's your crown jewels. Perhaps just going a bit more gingerly, but there's endless possibilities here with Gen AI.
No, I'm sure when I started with AWS, we used to sit and spend time convincing customers that cloud is safe.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're rightly laughing at it now. But that was where we actually started.
Yeah.
Now we have moved to the point where we take it for granted, and of course with all the right security guardrails, you just don't let your data be there, but with right guardrails. So with the same pinch of salt, if you approach the Gen AI with an open mind and use it rightly, it can do wonders. But it's all about how you leverage it and how you apply the right guardrails, like the sensitivity of the data, the bias behind it,
Yeah.
all the usual things that you need to take care of.
I think on the theme of guardrails and being careful, one of the other article I read recently, there was a case in the US where I think a lawyer was trying to sort of put forward a case to the judge. So he asked his junior do some research for me on similar cases. And so he used ChatGPT to find some cases. And so he found the case that he thought was correct. He passed it on to his boss, it was all good, and then the lawyer then kind of submitted all of his evidence to the judge. The judge then said, oh, there's a case here that I've never heard of before. Where did you find it? Turns out ChatGPT had invented a case that never really existed. And so that judge then sort of got into a lot of trouble because obviously he was citing things that actually never really happened. So I guess you're all really correct about the sort of the need for caution and guardrails around using AI.
It's generative, isn't it? It's like it's creating new content that the clues should have really been there for them in one sense.
So when we tell our customers about it, the easy way we ask them to remember it is 3 H's. Is your Gen AI model helpful? Is it honest? And is it harmless? Is it actually giving some sort of toxicity in the response it gives you? Or is it really actually helping the cause it was supposed to help? And is it being truthful when it is doing that? Now, these 3 questions, if asked, and these 3 are pretty much the guardrail I was referring to previously. And as long as these guardrails are applied rightly with right tools, then probably you are still getting the best of it without all the bad elements to it.
Yeah, and to add on that, on the software engineering perspective, I would say jobs might not necessarily change completely, but new jobs can be added. I would say the skills that we currently have as engineers are not useless, but they need to be adapted to the new tools that we use. And the first thing that comes to my mind is prompt engineering. So basically, you need to know what to ask for, how to manipulate your data, how to provide your context, how to explain what kind of result you expect. But I would also include, for example, jobs like people that are maintaining your generative AI, people that are testing it, analysts that are actually verifying the generative AI is providing what you need in your business. So I would say there's all that kind of layer of maintaining that generative AI and how to refine it going forward. That's actually going to be added on what we have already.
Yes, bring your customers closer to you as well. It's almost like don't develop things in isolation and test it, and almost to make sure you're on the right pathway. And just find those user cases where you're really going to take pain away from customers or make it easy for them to do business, do the jobs that they want it to do, so they don't have to do them themselves. It's not, you don't necessarily have to delight customers with this, but I think we can probably make our customers' lives so much easier.
Yeah. On the note of these new roles that we were talking about, prompt engineering is an interesting one. I was never convinced when someone told me about the prompt engineering. Like, I've always been searching Google, or some other search page. And what am I going to engineer when it comes to prompting this LLM? But then slowly, when you actually get into the details of it, you realize that there's a bit more to it that's happening with these large language models than the typical search that you have always been doing. So the way you actually ask it, it might know the stuff, okay? It's not like it doesn't know it. Imagine a child who knows everything, but then doesn't know how to answer. So you need to actually train that child to answer it in such a way that actually you can consume it and use it. So prompt engineering is one such art where you are actually training these big models to answer in a way that you want it. But the problem is the child learns it a bit too much than what you want, and then it answers creatively, ending up convincing, but not being the right answer. So it's a tricky one, and hence, for all good reasons, prompt engineering is a justifiable role to have.
Exactly.
And that's one such role that's going to evolve.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think definitely in the sort of the software engineering space, I think thinking about how technical practices might evolve, for example. So one of them that we hold dear to our hearts at Codurance is test-driven development. So trying to do test-driven development with these GenAI tools, that's not how it naturally wants to work. It wants to give you the complete answer to everything all at once. Whereas the idea of test-driven development is you kind of incrementally, iteratively build up the solution. So again, to your point, kind of how do you engineer it in a way that it goes down your workflow correctly?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's the agile way of working now, isn't it? It's, start small, be incremental, and I think find those, I guess, low-hanging fruits where you can start to work, and then you just learn as you go, and then you just start to evolve it, grow it, and before you know it, you start to take bigger and bolder steps. And I think that's probably how it's that hockey stick effect where you just feel like you're probably not moving the needle, and before you know it, you start to say your business or your customer's business just starts to really be a game changer for them in terms of what GenAI can give them.
Yeah, but I think upskilling is a bit needed. I think that's a bit we should not actually oversee. There is a bit of upskilling needed as to how the new applications that are created with GenAI can sustain the same sort of resiliency, high availability, and all the other things that we spoke about. So if a developer sits down to write a GenAI powered application, what are the bits that developer should know? How is he or she going to integrate with these large language models? And how are they going to do it in a safe, secure way and sustain it and thrive in that ecosystem? So those are the bits that probably we are wanting organization to focus on as they go and build these applications.
It's governance as well, I suppose, isn't it? So I'm sure probably probably teaching Granny to suck eggs by the looks of things in the room. But yeah, it's just reviewing your governance and thinking, is it fit for purpose in this new world, or is there extra steps that you need to put in place, or to make sure it's not slowing you down, but equally just make sure those guardrails and those things are in place, and make sure, have you got the right stakeholder community, or do you need to consult more broadly and widely in terms of enabling you to drive change? Because the last thing you want to do is be on the front page of a national newspaper as a result of some epic fail.
Definitely.
I promise epic fails are going to happen.
Yeah.
There's no...
Yeah, but you just don't want your name associated with them, do you?
I mean, for the humanity's good, it should happen, and then you learn, and then you change it. And that's how we evolve.
Yeah, and just, I suppose, before Eddie comes in, and almost like, we're often always thinking about what's the brand new idea that you need to come up with GenAI. And actually, some of the best businesses in the world, if you actually find out where did they get that idea from, it often wasn't inside their own business. They just saw that another business were doing it and not quite doing it right. So I guess another sort of, this is what we're thinking about, and hopefully you're thinking about as well. You don't have to come up with these brand new ideas. Just keep your ears to the ground. What are your industry peers doing? What are your customers talking about? What are your suppliers doing? And actually, how can you replicate? How can you imitate? Imitation is sometimes the sincerest form of flattery, but don't feel like you've got to come up with original ideas. Sometimes it's about being smarter and faster than those that came up with it.
But to add on that, if you're already using a generative AI, it's going to prevent you from doing the mundane and repetitive work, and it's going to allow you to be more creative, and it's going to allow you to add new ideas on your business.
Yeah.
That's maybe a nice segue then to those organisations that are looking to or thinking about using GenAI for the first time and not really knowing kind of where to start, how to start. How can they get going with GenAI?
I'll tell you a simple story. It may not be a customer, but it's just me. So I'm father of two. My wife is here too. This is my daily sleep routine. I go tell story to them, put them to sleep. Okay, and I've run out of stories, bedtime stories, at one point because I've told them all I know. So when the ChatGPT came along, I just throw a couple of characters to ChatGPT. This is not something I'm making up. I'm really doing it for sure. I throw a couple of characters at it. I throw it a fictitious environment. And I told it, this is for an 8-year-old kid. Keep it funny, keep it thrilling. It comes back to me with a story. I go back to my kids. So this is me as a father, okay? But if you ask me, our organizations leveraging it, I've seen a curtain maker recently offering it in their website, letting their customers to design their own curtains. They just prompt, I want this kind of It creates a design for them, and then they build they get their own curtains in their own dimensions. So this is the simplest organization doing wonders with GenAI, allowing their customers to customize. And there are big organizations who are transforming these legacy architecture. And I was recently reading an article wherein maybe soon the solutions architecture as a role might evolve into the point where you tell the GenAI application, this is the kind of application I want with this, and then it builds and deploys it. So I think the future is scary and exciting, but then I will let our customers decide what they want to build.
I would say, sorry.
No, you go next time.
Okay. I would say first you need to identify your needs. You need to identify what you need the generative AI for. As I mentioned, it can be for designing, it can be for automation. So you need to make sure from the beginning that you have a generative AI that's having the data to help you at exactly the field that you need. As I mentioned before, again, there's new jobs, how you maintain that generative AI, how you are concerned about the fitability to your business, how you are taking the regulations in considerations and the ethical bits. So you'll need these kind of new jobs to maintain your own application of generative AI or to support you in your endeavors. So yeah, I would say it's more about adding an extra layer of complexity, but you need to know what you need it for.
Yeah, I bet everyone in this room's already had a play with ChatGPT. Certainly when I like, I guess, just experimenting with it before sort of think about the business. I've got a side hustle. I tutor maths to GCSE age students, and seriously, some of them are super bright, and particularly if they're trying to get to those sort of 7, 8 and 9, I've used ChatGPT just to help create sort of real-time content. And a few weeks ago, I attended it was a Tony Blair conference. I know that sometimes get a groan, sometimes people get a bit uplifted by that. It depends where you are on the political spectrum. But just talking about Gen AI and what it potentially could do to the UK economy and the global economy. And there were some really cool presentations around Gen AI in terms of what they're delivering predominantly, and it pains me to say it, in just private schools, but around that whole personalised education experience, and actually starting to think about how do we start to get some of those personalised education experiences into state schools and really help to accelerate learning. And it was just showing how that interaction happens with young people in terms of where they're just ploughing through content, so you just throw more content at them, and then the teacher could be seeing where they're getting stuck, where suddenly we're working through on Pythagoras, switch over to trigonometry, head just goes into a bit of a pickle, but you start to unblock that. So they've got these classrooms, and instead of it just being one teacher delivering the same content to 20 to 30 children, you're able to sort of almost run this sort of dynamic classroom. But certainly think about in the workplace in terms of training courses and how you deliver training to different people and what sort of mediums. I mean, how many of us have sat on an anti-corruption training course this morning, because I've only been at Saint-Gobain as a full-time employee for a month, and I've got to get through this in 2 weeks, and go, seriously, how many times do I have to just click through? Can't I just go to the quiz and do it because I've done it at other employees here, and then just move on and I'm done? So I just think like this sort of generative AI and think about how do you make your employees productive, think about the employee experiences and taking some of those experiences and really personalising them in the same way you can for your business stakeholders. And customer is just a homogenous thing, but there's so many different stakeholders within those different organisations, and how you can kind of personalise. And that's where Gen AI can really help you have much more meaningful interaction with different individuals.
Yeah. I think crux of what Joe and Nadia probably that quoted was, your own use case is the hero. That should be in the middle of everything, and you work backwards from that. That's what we usually tell in Amazon as well, that you work backwards from your use case. And Gen AI is just a tool, and it need not be the answer. Sometimes we tell our customers, if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So you just you just try to fix everything with it. No, we work backwards, and if Gen AI is the answer, so be it. Then we will use that to actually solve it. But it need not be Gen AI always. Is something that we would request you to remember.
Yeah, there's certainly some business problems. They say actually a human involvement can be almost like 7 times more effective than a digital solution, a Gen AI solution. So just make sure that you're not putting Gen AI where actually, you really do need a human in that particular. If you think about what's been happening this week in Greece and abroad, where you've got, can you imagine tourists, phoning for help, and they've got to deal with, a bot. You just need a human then. So put Gen AI in the place where it helps, it takes pain away for customers. It makes their interaction with your business, your brand, your colleagues frictionless and effortless, and just make sure you don't neglect that human interaction where it really is needed most.
And also be aware that it is a new tool, and if it's a wider number of employees that you're gonna be asking them to use, be considerate and also offer the necessary training to be able to have it as something that's gonna aid their job and not be something that's gonna make it more difficult.
So given it is so new, and maybe it's kind of like a bit hard to get started and know how to get started, are there services perhaps on AWS, for example, Dinesh, that teams could be using to help them get started and in the right way?
Yeah, that's a great question, Matt. We in AWS have got quite a broad, broader AWS services for machine learning, and there's quite a depth to it too. I'm not sure if you're following. There has been recent announcement around Bedrock. That's one of the services that AWS offers for customers to jump into and use Gen AI. So there's quite a lot of foundation models that customers could play with, experiment what works for them, what doesn't work for them, and then pick and choose the right model, fine tune it, and create this Gen AI application. So yesterday there was an announcement in our New York summit about these agents that the customers could do, which means leveraging the reasoning aspect of them. So reasoning, I would say, is, let's say I give you a chain of thought problem Like I had 11 apples in my hand, I gave 5 to someone, 6 and 6 to this person. How many do I have? So as a human brain, we solve it step by step. Now we have already actually started leveraging these big large models for these kind of reasoning activities as well. So you throw a situation at it, give it few APIs it can interact with and get the right data. It can chain all together and solve a problem for you on the fly. So there is no real business logic sitting there and actually doing that. So no one has written that code, but it's something. So I would request people to actually go and check out these announcements on Bedrock, and the immediate ones probably that you could leverage is Code Whisperer. So if any one of you haven't heard about Code Whisperer, is an amazing tool for productivity. So your developers could actually leverage Code Whisperer. They could just type some comment as to what they want to do, and it would generate chunks of code for you. It's absolutely free, but there's a professional tier to it, which might cost you and gives you a bit more enterprise support and security. But otherwise, it's free for all of you to go and try in your own favorite IDEs. So there is quite a lot happening in AWS ecosystem on that front. So this is a nice slide. Thanks for bringing it up, Matt. Maybe I'll request Adia or Joe to actually add some before I jump into it.
No, I was already on it. I was reading it. So
Okay.
if you want to explain further, that's fine by me.
Yeah. So today, if you are thinking about building your own GenAI applications, I think this slide would make more sense. Maybe if you want to take a photo or something, you can. This is just part of this course that Deep Learning AI and AWS have created. So this is a famous course that's out in Coursera, and it's absolutely free as well. So please feel free to go back and enroll to it, and you will dive deep into the deep learning world and how these GenAIs actually work. But the essence of this slide is, you see this bottom layer, that's infrastructure, and it could be any your on-premise or cloud provider, AWS or whatever cloud provider of your choice. So you have the right infrastructure that you need for running these large models, supported by the right model. So you pick and choose the large language model that you want to run with. It could be ChatGPT or Llama or whatever, Plant, T5 or whatever model that actually works for your particular use case, solves your particular business problem. You pick that right model, host it on this infrastructure that you have chosen, and you will have additional sources. For example, your own documentations, knowledge repositories and databases that you want to actually leverage whenever you are actually asking LLM a question. Let's say you go and actually ask LLM a question, it will answer it. But then will it answer the same question with the context of your organization? Maybe not. And if you have to actually give it that power of answering the question with the context of your own organization, then it needs support from these external databases and the information sources that you have got within your organization. So that's where this box comes from. And then it generates outputs. Now, how to tie all of this together? How to make these LLMs talk to these information sources, validate and actually identify whether they have given the right information. Now, that's where these frameworks come into existence. So there are some famous frameworks such as LangChain and the agent stuff that I told that Bedrock has announced is bringing you that kind of capability. And then on top of it is your applications and your end consumers. So if you are imagining to actually bring GenAI applications alive in your world, then this is what probably it would look like from top down. Your consumers interact with your applications. The applications interact with these frameworks, offered by any providers or your own open source frameworks. And they interact, they help you orchestrate the interaction between the large language models, information sources, and they run on the infrastructure of your choice. So this is a typical world of GenAI application to bring it in a single page for you. But then there is quite a lot you need to do in the process of identifying the right model, because there's thousands of models out there. You need to just pick and find the right one and probably fine tune it to the extent that it actually offers you contextual responses that your use cases are for. So there is quite a bit of software engineering that still needs to happen. It's not like you throw in a LLM there and everyone just has to sit and chill. That's
I think
quite
one of the key things I think it's worth pointing out is that people think you have to kind of build these models from scratch. That's not always the case, right?
Yeah.
I think your
Yes.
Amazon and other
Yeah.
services, like they're providing you the foundational models for you then to kind of fine tune, configure. Your job then is to, as you said, select the correct one for your use case and then configure it and fine tune it.
Yeah, I think just to add on to that, it's almost like this is like I guess an ideal world, but I suppose be realistic about your customers' setup. You know, have they got a data lake yet? Is that where all the data lives? How well is that data sort of looked after? So I think, you know, it's one thing to be able to like, point GenAI at it and hope and help make the magic happen. But if you've not got standard, you've not your data lake in order, you're not very good at, you've got to make sure that the way customer data comes in and it's organised and ordered. So it's just really important that you keep those foundations solid and secure, because that's going to help you get more value out of GenAI. So again, when you're looking after clients, it's help them with GenAI, but actually really help them make sure the data's in check. And I kind of like a lot of data organisation to a bit, I don't know what you like at home. You know, if I empty dishwasher opens up and I like cutlery goes into the knives, forks, spoons, that's dead easy. But every time you sort your Tupperware drawer out, it's almost the minute you've sorted it out, it's just in chaos again. And that's a lot what customer data can be like. So just being really hot and making sure the clients you're working with are hot on their data methodology, their data cataloging, their data organisation, because that will help them get more value out of GenAI as well.
Do you think then, Joe, that's kind of the foundational building blocks that have to be in place for teams really to sort of make a success of GenAI?
Absolutely.
Yeah. But I think that's a very good point actually, Joe, because many of our customers want to do AI or GenAI, but then when it comes to the data governance or data strategy, they haven't even started. So it's good to get your house in order before we actually jump into the innovation side of it. But having said that, the benefit of these kind of LLMs is that they are pre-trained to some extent, but then you have to just fine-tune it.
Yeah.
The amount of data that has gone into train these models are so huge that you could actually sometimes just benefit from it out of the box. But then you still have to do some bit of fine tuning if you want your organization to be, interacting with a customized model that is less toxic. And I'm not saying the LLMs out there are toxic, but there will always be contextual responses that you want your end users to experience, rather than just a generic one and another, large language model would have outputted. I think that's where the fine tuning is an art. Probably that's where many of our software engineering effort will be going in the future. Fine-tuning these LLMs is an art on its own. There are so many techniques and so many algorithms out there. You just have to pick and use the right tools to actually do that, so you get what you want and able to sustain it with right sort of machine learning pipelines.
And to add on that, in my view, the AI is as good as your information is. So if it's biased, then it's biased and you're going to have errors that is going to be lasting. But the fact that you have a customized AI instead of an open AI, that's the reason why it's going to be tailored to your needs. So you need to state your expectations clear, because it's going to be custom tailored, but at the same time you need to consider how you can get it more extensive in the future if it needs to. So an open AI, something that's going to be used by everyone, can help with many needs, but it's not going to be tailored at the same time.
I think the organizations are slowly opening up on what data was used for training. It was earlier not so revealed, and recently, the Llama, when they actually released it, they told what data was used for training, and they are being more and more transparent. But then that's where I like the synthetic data option. You can actually, when you fine tune it, you can feed in synthetic data that is actually not biased, inclusive. It is actually considering diverse population, and hence making it more inclusive and less biased when it outputs some information. So I think GenAI is actually going to bring more fairness to the system if it is done right. I mean, it is all boiling down to the data. The data part that she just mentioned is the crux of it. If it is done right, then the bias can be avoided.
I guess the key thing there is if it's done right. But also, who chooses what the right is as well. That's a very contextual thing.
There are tools out there to measure it. So there are tools and effective way to actually quantify it as to what is acceptable, what is not acceptable. But it's an evolving space. These tools are still evolving, and I'm sure we are. When we floated this event, some of these tools were not there. How do you believe? And then by the time I catch my train back to Edinburgh, I'm sure there'll be a few more tools out there. So. This is what it is at the moment. We will see what we have next year.
There's also the whole debate recently around kind of open source models versus closed source models. So I think recently I saw Meta have chosen to open source their latest version of their model, for example. So there's obviously a lot of discussion around open source.
Yeah, I was at Salesforce World Tour. I don't know if it's relevant for you guys, but I mean certainly it was all about data, AI, sort of CRM, and sort of the power of that coming together. And Salesforce have been using Einstein, which is probably more of a predictive, but they're now on that sort of pathway to sort of GenAI. But just seeing it, being used in real scenarios in terms of how you kind of put those campaigns together, how you kind of create that content, and then how you expose that kind of customer data to create meaningful, engaging content that absolutely looks like it's been crafted by a human is quite unbelievable, scary, whatever you want to call it. But I think, some of the ways to start might be about, where the AI is embedded in kind of other applications, and that can be a place to start rather than actually starting with raw tools. But again, you'll know your own expertise and what you feel safe about. But again, watch and see what others are doing, imitate, don't be shy about copying, learning, and building out on it. But I think we're going to see a lot of exciting stuff during the course of this year.
I think you're I'm sorry, Matt. The point I wanted to add was, I think you have a secret recipe within your organization. I think your own customers' data, their interactions is your secret recipe, and you should still actually hold on to it and use it to give better experience for your customers when you fine-tune the model. But I think we haven't touched on that point yet on the open versus closed. I don't know. What's your thoughts, Matt? How should it go?
I think it really depends on many things as well. I think so. From a software perspective, I tend to kind of veer towards open source software.
Yeah.
You benefit from the wider community around it. You're not kind of beholden to any one company steering that piece of code or software in their own direction. You get the benefit of the community as a whole.
But then it's going to be difficult, Matt. If you ask me, it's going to be difficult for a small and medium business organization to go and actually pre-train that kind of model, throw that kind of compute at it. But then, is it worthwhile? I think that's a question that your organization should sit and ask yourself. Is it worthwhile for me to actually go and create my own model, or am I better off actually taking one of those models and fine-tuning it? I think Bloomberg is a good example, right? Bloomberg went on to create their own GPT model because they know that they have this financial data that is, more specific to that particular industry domain that no one probably would have access through internet. And it makes complete sense to actually go and create that model on its own for themselves, rather than asking and leveraging some other model out there. So if your organization has got a unique proposition and unique data and that secret recipe that I mentioned, and have got amount of money and compute to throw at it, then why not go and create?
Yeah, I think it was an investment bank that's taken all of their documentation internally around sort of decision making for the advisors, and effectively sort of powered that into GenAI as an assistance tool for their own advisors around for the customers. So that's very much, they want that to be owned by them. That's their IP, very much kind of closed source in that respect.
Yeah, in our industry, so maybe not people not familiar with Saint-Gobain, but we kind of get stuff out of the ground, we mine a lot of products and make some products, and the whole drive towards sort of sustainability to say, well, what products can we recycle? And it's we're sort of speculating about whether we can use GenAI to actually say, well, what sorts of products could you reharvest, put through a production and then reuse those raw materials? And those things are like scratching your head trying to work out how on earth do you determine where you should be putting your big R&D so that you can recycle. Glass, thankfully, is one of those really good products to recycle. But in terms of buildings, when they come to end of life and they're potentially destroyed, they almost become landfill again. But how can you start to turn those products, and whether GenAI can start to solve some of the big business problems that we have, or global problems that we have around helping us all strive towards net zero.
Yeah, really good point. I think quite often we talk to our clients as Codurance around where best to sort of invest more of your energy and your time. And it's always around those things that are adding value to your business. So if you're adding, you're building models here that contain your core IP, then I think it would make sense to invest in kind of building models. If it's not, it's kind of like to one side, then probably better to leverage one of the service providing models in those cases.
It's not carbon efficient to burn such compute.
Exactly. Yeah. So for example, we've seen some clients that are looking to invest in chatbots, for example. So can I improve the customer sales process, customer service process through better chatbots? That's not really their customer, that's not really their business IP, that's not their core business, that's helping their customers with their products. That's where their IP is. So.
I think it's just a balancing it. It's like you crack the egg, you bake the cake, and once the cake's baked, the egg's in there, you ain't ever going to get that egg back out again. You've kind of had it. So it's almost like once you're putting something into it, GenAI, knowing that it's kind of out there, and as you're probably much more cyber savvy than I am, but I read this amazing book about this is how the world ends, and they talked about 0 days and the fact that almost like when they were doing the spyware, the Americans spying and the Chinese basically went, oh, this is how you guys spy on us, is it? And suddenly they basically reflected things back. So you want to be really, really careful about the things that make your secret sauce. What's your really valuable IP? And I guess just be really gingerly and be really careful. And if you're talking to your clients about those sort of business problems, just challenge the rationale, challenge the business case, and make sure you're not using a sledgehammer to crack a nut, and just find those sweet spots where GenAI can really make a big difference to the businesses.
I think lastly then, so where do we see GenAI going? Kind of some predictions for kind of the future, sort of next couple of years. Where do you think it might go? What might we see emerging in terms of tooling, use cases, those sorts of things?
Get me that crystal ball, Simon. So yeah, it's going to be funny next. I don't know, even I can't even say years now. I think it's going to be months. The way it is rapidly changing. I will again quote that same article. I think software engineering will go to the point where you just express what you need and you have it deployed. But maybe it's few years from now, or how much ever it takes. But it is getting there, and quite a lot of knowledge process outsourcing and business process outsourcing is going to transform, because more and more these LLMs have this reasoning capacity. I think one thing that has actually always been unique about human beings is our way of reasoning. I'm sure the humor sense is also a distinguished one for us. But then the reasoning capacity, once this LLMs acquire, and they have already acquired it, it makes them even more powerful. So any of those back office jobs that were out there, the process outsourcings are all going to get transformed, and and we are going to see more and more services. So the tools that are using every day will be infused with GenAI in some form or shape. It need not be that you will realize it, but you will already be using it. So I see more and more AWS services that will be infused with GenAI in the months or years to come, and so be the other ones. I'm sure you would have come across these tools from Adobe, for example. So there will always be softwares and services with GenAI infused into it that will give you a bit more productivity and creativity. But that's all I could speculate at this moment, Matt.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I would say, in my view as a software engineer, new jobs are going to be there because of generative AI. Shifts in skills are going to happen, but that's going to lead to better software development. It's going to lead to more secure checks on your products. It's going to lead to improved customer satisfaction as well. So I would say it's there. At the moment, it might be like you are gaining because you're using it, but I feel like in the future you might be missing out if you're not using it. So it can get to up to that level. I feel like it can contribute, as I mentioned. It lacks the creativity, it lacks the communication, it lacks the problem solving that we as humans have. But once we know how to learn how to be assisted by a generative AI, that's going to lead to multiple possibilities as well. And in customer satisfaction, I would think about identifying needs, gathering data for feedback, for example, or creating surveys as well. So it might be more about clustering the customers on more specific segmentation that we can have as human beings by manually computing them ourselves.
Yeah, that's a very good one, Nadia. I think one thing that I could remember is one of our customers solving accessibility. It's not something we touched on during this topic, but one of our customers, this is a real use case being solved. It's not a fictitious one. So if a person who is visually challenged is looking at a piece of art, imagine them actually having an earphone that explains them what's happening there. So they're working on this piece of product actually that will help the visually challenged, and that's happening right now. So we just have to leave it for imagination how much it will actually transform in terms of accessibility and inclusivity and diversity side of things. As I say, if I think we are still getting that bias part right. We are not yet there, but if we eventually get that bias part of it right, then we are going to have much fairer and inclusive world. If they are infused into the applications.
Yeah, just to build on that, I wanted to find my stats before I kind of quoted some nonsense figures. But I think they said the UK economy is worth about $3 trillion, and McKinsey's expecting that GenAI is going to be worth, almost like $4.5 trillion annually. So it just kind of gives a sense of where it's going. So my kind of predictions is, in a year's time, I feel like almost every business will be doing GenAI in some capacity. I wonder how it's going to change the world of work for us as human beings in terms of, we're already seeing like the 4-day work week trial. I just wonder if as a human contribution, whether we kind of, when we reflect on how we worked even 10 years ago in terms of how much travel we were doing, how many hours we burnt in the office, and just how that work's going to go, and some of the schemes around universal basic income can start to change, and actually what does the world of work look like. And certainly for all of us, and particularly young people, that whole growth mindset and the resilience and the ability to adapt and change, because we can all reflect on our working careers, whether they've been 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and you realise how much change we've all personally experienced during that time. And I just think that rate of change is going to accelerate and go at tremendous speed. So the ability for all of us in the room to be able to adapt to that, and how we help young people adapt to that, I think the way we work is going to feel very, very different in 10 to 20 years' time.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think one of the big things that we all know is that we can't avoid change. Change is going to happen whether we like it or not. So
it's the friction. It's how much friction do you I think hopefully all of us in the room are almost like, we embrace change, we love change, but actually change is generally uncomfortable for all of us. It's just how quickly you move through that kind of uncomfortable sensation, and actually it's almost going to feel like daily change. So actually your ability to ride that out and to thrive and to let things go and bring in new things into your life, and doing that in a way that's embracing and comfortable, is going to make your existence so much more pleasurable.
That reminds me of maths teachers doing strike back then when the calculators were introduced.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so I think, in the same way that my children, I've got a 16 and 14-year-old, and they just go like, what, there was only 3 channels, Mum, and then Channel 4 started when you were like 6, and they just kind of, and even just like explains that you had to go to the bathroom like when the adverts were on because you couldn't like pause the telly. I think just the ordinary way we go about doing things, in 10 years' time, you're going to go, God, I can't believe we actually did that. I think that's what life is going to feel like.
I think we'll see more customization and personalization.
Yeah.
I think like right now we see lots of generic advertisements and generic offerings and deals because they can't personalize them. Well, it's too expensive to personalize.
I still can't believe that
more.
the train companies didn't know I sat on a train for 2 hours and there was absolutely no push notifications happening still. And you're thinking they should have solved this 20 years ago. You just kind of think that almost we are in danger of probably getting overly personalised comms because they're going to know everything about us, because they kind of do already, but they just really don't know how to harness it. And GenAI could ultimately enable them to harness, because somebody somewhere or some system somewhere knows I'm sat in this room right now, and they're not making the most, are they, of that kind of the way they personalise and engage with us as individuals. And actually, we're the product, aren't we? We've been the product for a while, and actually, we're about to get really exploited.
I was talking to my gym trainer recently, and he was mentioning that yes, he constantly actually floats his training videos in Instagram and stuff. There were a couple of them that got so many likes. The couple of them did not actually get pushed as much as he thought. But then what he realized is now he started using ChatGPT. So it could actually take cues from the ones that really worked and create a new one that will actually probably use all the positive stuff that it has observed from the ones that worked. So more and more of these marketing campaigns from many of these customers who are targeting their end users is going to be the marketing on steroids is how I will put it. Now they know what is going to work, and they have better insights into that data than our naked eye could observe. So they will actually create more generative content that can actually appeal to their end users better than before. So it's not like you're shooting in blind. You are actually targeting them with the right information.
Yeah, I think we'll see more and more of that, as you say. I think also it'll become harder and harder to tell content authored by a human compared to content authored by AI.
I think you mentioned deepfakes, didn't you, at the very beginning? I don't know if anyone fell for the whole Martin Lewis when he had the deepfake advert and he had to get out on Twitter really quickly to sort of say, this is not me, because he's got this fabulous reputation for endorsing and making recommendations. And you probably all watched The Great Hack that was on Netflix 2016, talking about how they use social media to potentially influence elections globally. And it took Facebook and the likes a while to really just understand how their tool was basically hijacked really and used in that way to kind of influence democracies and throw propaganda. And the deepfake is the next generation. It's like, who's going to be ahead here? Are the criminals going to get ahead and take advantage of the tool, or are the good people in the room and the good citizens going to make sure that we harness AI for good, and that GenAI isn't harnessed for bad? And we've got to kind of think how they think and make sure we outsmart them.
Yeah. I think policies across the government is actually evolving in this space to cater to that legal needs.
Yeah, that's what I had in my mind right now. I was like, if there's something faulty generated by AI, who's going to be responsible? So I feel like the more people that are going to be using generative AI, that's going to be influencing legal reasons. It's going to be influencing the laws in the future as well. Because, we allow generative AI to do stuff, but who's taking responsibility, or who's reviewing the outputs that we're having there?
Yeah. We'll better just do a quick pause there, but thanks for your input panel. Really good discussion. Simon, are there any comments or questions we have on?
There is, there's quite a lot, so we'll get through as many as we can. So going for the ones that have had most votes so far. So the first one is, what spaces in AI should young professionals get involved in, as it's clear AI is the future? How can they take advantage of the current climate?
Anyone wants to go with that? Or?
I can start from software engineering perspective. So with software engineering, as I said, it can help on many levels. It can help coding, testing, debugging. It can help you upskill. So code reviews, for example, it's an important bit. It can identify faulty bits of code. It can identify bad practices. It can identify security flaws. On a wider level in the company, for example, when you have new employees, you're going to need to onboard them and you're going to need to train them. again, you can have generative AI as an assistant tool to support that. Prediction analysis as well, for example, for product development or setting up timelines, appreciating the amount of work that's left, whatever. And also, I would say natural language processing as well. So say you come from the background, I know this is a requirement on a business level. You can specify that to the generative AI, and you can actually translate that into technology-specific requirements that you need to do.
Yeah, I'm probably going to come at it more at a much more basic level, and not to say that that's the wrong level, but to say actually for young people, sometimes the digital and tech industry can feel just elusive and not for them. And all of us were 16 once and 18 once, and maybe we were, taking PCs apart or coding in our rooms. But I think I just say that so many young people they almost like don't know where to start, and actually those early years access points are just so important. So as business leaders and employers in the room, I suppose just try and reflect on where you were in your early years career and look out for I talk about attitude and aptitude, and sometimes it's about, helping young people get that entry point into work, to look up and to almost guide them and skill them. And again, in your gift to sort of train. And for the young people that I talk to when I volunteer as an enterprise advisor in a sort of school in Rochdale, and they have, it's like two opposite spectrums. You've got children who are knocking out the park, set 9, so grade 9, the A-star brigade, and their parents are almost going, you're into medicine. Actually, don't go to digital tech, you go into medicine. And you've got the kids who are going to be lucky to get the grade 4 in maths and English, which is old school C. And they're going, digital and tech's not for me. And actually saying the digital and tech industry is so diverse and has so many things on offer, and you can be an absolutely brain box, computer science, and get into the programming. But actually you could be, kids are already, they've got iPads on their phone, smartphones on their phone, user experience, customer experience, what holds your attention span. And for the young people to say, just have attitude and aptitude, think about your communication, think about how you collaborate. Some of these things that the social skills that they're learning in the playground are going to become really useful in the workplace, and just take a chance on young people, train them up, and potentially we could have a really great industry in the UK around GenAI. Thanks
for that, Jo. I was recently actually doing a classroom session for year S5 students. And then you talk about machine learning, you talk about maths, it doesn't sparkle the eye. But then when you talk about F1 race, if I know which car is going to overtake this car in lap 13, they're like, wow, can you? Yeah, I can tell that. And then when that happens, that spark happens to them, So I think the better way to actually inspire the young generation would be to throw the use cases at them. This has been solved, and this has been solved with machine learning, and then they get that hook. Oh, maybe I need to know more about it. There is something magic there, and then they get to know, oh, how do I go to get to the foundation? So I think more and more use cases we show them and explain them. This is how actually this came or this happened. Then they get that interest, and then they will find their way because the resources are abundant. I feel like we are not stuck with less resources as how it was when we were in childhood days. Resources are abundant, as you say, Joe. They could just jump into iPad and they can access all the information. But then they should have that interest to go and jump into it, which probably will be created by showcasing those interesting use cases that were solved. For example, the vaccine for COVID, how it was solved? It was with machine learning. Someone was throwing a lot of compute at it, and it took all that data and came up with this new vaccine combination. So something like that, actually, I see like it is always inspiring. And then I think the skill set is a big gap. I see there's quite a large skill gap. I think the foundations of machine learning is a good place to start. But it all boils down to the passion to actually learn. That's where it starts, and then there is no one stopping them. They will explore it all themselves. You don't have to even give them any way to actually find those information.
I think also from a sort of software standpoint as well, I think you'll still need the solid fundamental skills around writing good, clean code, good design, mapping to a business problem, those things aren't going to go away. In fact, they're going to be
Yeah.
more important because we have to
Yeah.
interrogate and critique the output of these models. The danger is we blind them, accept the output from, say, ChatGPT or other models
Yeah.
blindly, and we have these products and software programs that
Totally.
don't really
And kids are notorious for like that. They always ask the why, isn't it? The elephant's child, asking more questions. And I think that kind of curiosity to understand, and I think that's where I guess young people, and they challenge me every day when I interact with them, and I get so much from them as well as me imparting my experience on them. And I think it's just creating that environment where they can be curious, they can try and understand the why, and just again, like I say, just reflect on the fact that we were all early years once, and somebody took a chance on us when we had that first interview or that first break. We can reverse engineer it to see where those chances came along, and I think we can all just try and do our bit to try and help young people with the future ahead.
Okay, thanks everyone. So another question is, how can organisations in regulated sectors manage compliance when they are leveraging GenAI?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I think we should pay attention to the models we pick. They are the underlying thing that is going to actually do most of the bits. So every model provider who is actually giving that model is going to give you all the model specific details along with their model card or something, which means it will give you what data was it trained on, whether that bit of data it was trained on is compliant with your regulations in your industry world, and is it possible for you to fine tune it or not, because not all models are fine tunable. So you need to pay attention whether if I pick this model, can I fine tune it or not, and if it gives me an output of some sort, can it actually track back to the source from where it was it got that from. So that ability to actually go back to the source where it generated that content is a very important thing that most of the organizations are looking for. So there is this evolving space where it's still an evolving space, as I mentioned, where every bit of data that goes into the training is watermarked. So at any point, if there is a completion or output that is generated by this model, you could always go back to that piece of training data that actually made it happen. We are not yet there, but it is getting to that point. So I would request all the organizations which are compliant focused to pay attention to these bits when they pick the model for their applications or generative AI use cases, and come and talk to us. We have this AWS Innovations Lab for especially for GenAI. So it's an innovation center purely for GenAI. You could just come with your use cases. We have experts who we will line you up with. You could talk to them, bring it alive, and find the right solution that will work for you, the right model that you can pick and run with. So there is quite a lot of guidance that we could do in that preliminary stage. So you're set on a right track from the compliance and security and governance perspective.
Yeah, I would say just be really proportionate, particularly if you're talking like regulated industry. I suppose it's what are you trying to achieve, and to go back to some of the things you're saying there about what's the source, because it's Gen AI, it's generating, it's creating new content, rather than actually finding the actual content and how that's kind of visualized. So just make sure you're using Gen AI to be generative content creating where you want something to be created, whereas actually when you're trying to find ways to report on legislation or regulation and conform, then you don't want to be making stuff up, because that could really get you in hot water. So I think just make sure you're using the right tools in the right way and be proportionate.
Yeah, I agree with you both. I think the biggest concern for an organization is the use of sensitive data. If you ask something, or if you given an output or given an input, who is that input going to be shared with? So that's why you need organizations, you need support on your generative AI services, in my view, so that you can have it custom tailored and avoid sharing sensitive data.
Yeah, that's a good one idea. So for example, Matt, I will quote, Amazon actually offers these first-party models called Titan. And like the likes of ChatGPT, so we offer the first-party models called Titan. So when you actually send a prompt to this model, we assure you that none of that information that was in prompt, either your own customer information or whatever that was part of that prompt, is not going to be used for retraining the model. And it's not going to be held in any of our data store for whatever reason, And so you need to get that kind of assurance from the model provider. What happens to the data that is coming as part of the prompt as soon as it leaves your space and enters into that world?
Yeah, I think that's a really key point. So that is kind of that sort of training data. Is that happening? Is your data being fed off to the underlying model? Plus, can you see into the model? Can you understand how it made certain decisions along the way to then be able to kind of track back, as you said?
And someone said, like, write an email, like, it can be basically read out in court. I think there's a meme that went around, didn't it? So, like, email, like, HR might get hold of it and you've got to defend yourself. I think it's that kind of auditability and just making sure it's not become a law. It's an animal that's out of control. So I think that's that governance piece again, isn't it, in terms of how you go about doing it, making sure you can trace it all back, so that should you get in a situation, you've got that audit trail, so you can see exactly how things have evolved.
I thought so. This question is probably just pulling on that string a bit more, really. So, could you talk a bit more about the accuracy of the information generated by these tools?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question, I would say. The tricky thing with these models are that they are trained to be trained to respond in such a way that we are convinced. Once you read it, there was this question called, what do you think about this Mars dune tree plant? There is no such plant, okay? And then that model comes back with a response that this is this type of plant with this kind of smell, this kind of, places is where it grows in Mars. All that stuff, it's making it up, and it's making it up in a convincing way. You have no clue that it has made it up. I think for it to be honest, I think we need to be actually a bit more careful in terms of during the fine-tuning phase of the model. We need to pay attention to some more metrics that calculates the accuracy of the model. And it is getting even more tricky when it comes to these large language models. For example, when I say outside is cold, the way they actually score those models will still give it a high score. Yes, grammatically it's wrong, but the fact that it has got all the right words in that whole phrase, it is going to actually give it a good score. So the way to actually score these models from accuracy front is also evolving, but it has reached a good point where you can be fairly confident with the accuracy evaluations. There are some good libraries out there that you could lean on to assess the accuracy of them. But then, that's something that you need to pay attention to. So one important thing probably we should remember is it's not all green. Yes, it is GenAI. Yes, it can do stuff for you, but it is not all green. So you need to again pay attention to those 3 H's I mentioned. Is it helpful? Is it honest? Is it harmless? As long as these 3 are taken care, then you have a model that is working for your business. Otherwise, not.
I don't personally think it's a panacea and the answer to all questions. And if you think about even just basic apps, how many times have we clicked on the BBC weather app and it's raining outside, which tells you it's sunny? It's just like, seriously, And I've got an Alexa at home, and I try and make it easy for Alexa, just because I say, I'm either in a talky mood and I want to listen to like a bit of LBC conversation, or I just want to listen to a bit of Manchester music, and I ask for Radio X. And those are really the 2 things that I ask her for. And the amount of times she just ends up throwing something else on, I was like, seriously, just give me 2 choices. So even though when you're throwing fairly simple instructions, you still end up getting a complete wrong answer. So I think it's almost, I bring it back to children again, like when you're doing a maths calculation and you kind of work out roughly where you think the answer is going to be. Is it going to be 100 or is it going to be 10,000? You've kind of got in your head. So I think it's just where do you think the answer is going to go, and that'll help you sanity check whether is it going towards the direction you went. And if you're actually getting a different answer, or the model's thrown something up, digging deeper to help understand why. And it might be that you were completely wrong in your hypotheses, but spend some time to think about where do you think you're going to land on whatever the business problem is you're trying to solve with GenAI.
Yeah, I think, in my view, it all comes to, for example, I was reading about ChatGPT and how its data is gathered from the internet. I don't know now, in terms of machine learning algorithms, whether there's any kind of label data that's kind of specifying in which you can train your models knowing your results. Because, for example, a use case that I encountered myself was I was checking a historical event and the actual names of the people there were not right. So somewhere on the internet, that information was there. And you can't blame the AI for saying that because it was there. But at the same time, you don't know because it was not labeled. So yeah, that's my view on this one. I think GPT was auto-regression model, so it's kind of updating in time, and that's something to consider.
I forgot to mention 2 points I wanted to cover. I think one important point we should all remember is all these models are frozen at a point. Yes? So anything that you are seeing, whenever the training completed is when it was frozen. Imagine I take your brain and freeze it today, and a month after it, you will not know things have happened. So if you go and ask ChatGPT, who is our British Prime Minister, it might very well tell you Boris Johnson.
You can all ask it.
Because that's when it was trained. You know, it's a tricky question for us anyway.
And if it gets Liz Truss, we'll all be going, Liz Truss, who is she? So
let's not get into that. But I think the most important point there is it's frozen at a point in time. Yeah. So for that reason, it need not be accurate. There are other techniques that you can use to make it accurate, give it that dynamic context. There are techniques like RAG and few other things that I could dive into, which will actually give it that dynamic nature of answering it, but they are frozen in time. And then another important point that I wanted to drive was, yes, they are sounding great, but you know what? At the crux of it, it is just guessing the next word. There's nothing more to it. It's just doing it so better that it appears for you like it's doing wonder. But all that it's doing is it's just guessing the next word. And if you actually throw a mathematical equation to it, for example, if I give it what is 412 divided by 7, you will be surprised. It will give you a wrong answer.
I think that's a really great point. Really great point. I think there's time for one
more.
person.
Yeah, well, there's just one more. And so that is increased productivity means companies can do more, or at least the same, with less. Will this result in fewer opportunities for people in software? And we are at 7:30, so can you just do like a one-line answer, please?
You need to repeat the question because I didn't get the last bit.
Yeah, of
sorry.
course, yeah. I'll do the whole thing. So increased productivity means companies can do more, or at least the same, with less. Will this result in fewer opportunities for people in software?
If you're great at what you do, you are great at what you do in software engineering, generative AI, it asks for an input. So you need to know what to ask for, and you need to be analytical enough to be able to analyze whether that's the suitable result that you have. So you need the knowledge. You still need to be a qualified software engineer. It's just an added tool. We didn't reject debugging tools. We didn't reject anything that made our life easier as software engineers. Why would we reject something new now? So as long as it's safe and ethical, why not use it?
yeah, I just say yes, grow, keep learning, embrace it. I think the future is really exciting, and if you've got an aptitude in software engineering, you've got a fabulous future ahead of you.
So we'd love a little bit of feedback on this evening's event, so you can scan in the QR code there. It's just a short form if you could just answer a few questions. But really just wanted to say thank you so much to everybody for coming this evening, and thank you in particular, of course, to Adia, to Joe, to Dinesh, and of course to Matt. Thanks for your time and your input, and yeah, thanks again for coming everyone this evening. Sorry, Matt. So, as I said right at the start, there's plenty of food, there's plenty of drinks left, so please stick around if you can, and yeah, we'll have a bit more of a chat outside. Thanks, everyone.